Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a journey into the unexplained. Tonight, we bring you 3 haunting testimonies from individuals who've experienced something out of this world. Stories of UFOs and alien encounters that will chill you to your core. So sit back, dim the lights, and let the darkness take control. It was the summer of 1981. A time when the days stretched long and the nights carried whispers of the unknown. I was a 10-year-old boy living in a small, quiet town in rural Montgomery County, Indiana. The air was crisp, and the skies were a clear canvas of blue that day. My older brother Patrick and I were playing in the front yard of our neighbor's house, lost in the innocent joy of childhood games. Our father was a seasoned Indiana State Trooper, a man of reason and logic, and someone who instilled in us a sense of discernment. Perhaps that's why what happened next has haunted me for decades. It defied reason, logic, and everything we thought we knew about the world. As we laughed and played, something caught our attention, a glimmer in the sky just above the neighbor's roof. We froze, our laughter dying in our throats. There, hovering silently, were 2 silver discs, smooth and metallic, gleaming ominously under the sun. They were about 100 meters away, one slightly higher than the other, and they rotated ever so slowly, as if deliberately showing themselves to us. We watched, entranced and terrified, as the saucers hung there, defying gravity and logic. The silence around us grew oppressive, the usual hum of the neighborhood fading into an eerie stillness. Then, without warning, the discs shot off to the east at a speed that no earthly machine could match. They vanished from sight in an instant, leaving only the unsettling memory of their presence. We ran inside, breathless and shaking, and told our parents what we had seen. Their initial skepticism melted as they saw the terror in our eyes. Though they didn't witness it themselves, they couldn't ignore how shaken we were. But that's not where the story ends. That same summer, something even more chilling occurred. Something I've struggled to reconcile ever since. It was late one night, around 3 or 4 in the morning. I had gone to bed as usual, clutching my beloved security blanket. It was old and tattered, with a distinctive cigarette burn along the edge, a detail that made it uniquely mine. That blanket was my anchor, my comfort, my shield against the dark. That night I dreamt, or at least I think I did. In my dream, I found myself in a vast cavernous space. The ceiling was hidden in darkness, and the air was thick with an unspoken dread. A narrow walkway stretched before me with a metal railing on one side. The floor was riddled with gaping holes, black voids that seemed to breathe, as though something alive and terrible lurked within. I told myself, something must live down there. The thought sent shivers down my spine. Ahead to the right was a bright, glowing area. Shadows moved within the light. Beings, though I couldn't discern their shapes. They were watching me, their interest palpable and unnerving. I felt exposed, like a mouse under the gaze of a predator. As I walked toward the light, clutching my blanket tightly, I suddenly dropped it. It slipped from my fingers and fell into one of the dark holes to my left. A surge of panic and humiliation washed over me as I watched it disappear into the void. The beings seemed to take notice. They moved closer, their presence pressing down on me like a weight. Though I can't recall their faces, or even if they had faces, I remembered the fear. It was unlike anything I've ever felt. Then there was nothing but darkness. I woke up the next morning, drenched in sweat. My heart pounded as I reached for my blanket, desperate for its familiar comfort. But it wasn't there. I tore apart my bed, searching every corner of the room. I called for my parents, and soon the entire family joined the hunt. Our house wasn't big, barely 1,500 square feet, but we searched every inch of it. The blanket was gone, as though it had never existed. My parents were baffled. I had no history of sleepwalking, No reason for the blanket to simply vanish. They eventually replaced it with a new one, a blue blanket that felt foreign and wrong. My mom even replicated the cigarette burn, but it wasn't the same. It never would be. To this day, I can't explain what happened. The dream, or whatever it was, felt real, too real, and the disappearance of my blanket, that was no dream. When I think back to that summer, I can't help but link the UFO sighting with the strange events that followed. Were they connected? Did those beings take more than just my blanket? Even now, the memory sends chills down my spine. It's the kind of story that makes people raise an eyebrow, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Believe me or don't, it doesn't matter. But if you ever see something strange in the sky, remember this. Some things don't belong to our world, and once they notice you, they may never truly leave. It was a warm May evening in 2008, the kind that made the Southern California air feel thick and restless. The clock read somewhere between 10 and 10:30 p.m. as I pulled into my parents' driveway after a long day of college classes. The house sat in quiet stillness, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights, a stark contrast to the weight I suddenly felt in the air. I was used to playing the nightly game of car shuffle with my father's truck or my brother's car. That night, I parked my own car on the street and headed inside to grab my dad's truck keys, the sound of crickets serenading the empty neighborhood. Nothing seemed unusual, just another mundane evening. When I stepped back outside, the first thing I noticed was the low, distant hum of a helicopter. I didn't think much of it. Living in this area meant helicopters weren't uncommon, but something about this sound made my chest tighten. It was subtle at first, a small tingle of unease that slowly crawled up my spine. As I moved my dad's truck to the curb and began to switch my car into the garage, the sound grew louder. My pulse quickened, though I told myself it was nothing. I was almost done. I parked the truck on the street and reached for the driver's side door when something stopped me cold. The helicopter wasn't just closer, it was directly above me. A shiver rippled through me as the noise roared in my ears, yet what followed froze me to my core. I felt it before I saw it, an overpowering sensation of being watched, as though a pair of unseen eyes bore into my very soul. My heart raced as I instinctively snapped my head upward. That's when I saw it. Hovering against the dark sky, no higher than a few thousand feet, was a massive triangular craft. Its three bright white lights formed a perfect pattern at its edges, glowing with an unnatural stillness. They didn't blink or flicker, just burned steadily against the night. But what truly caught my attention was at its center, a deep, ominous red light that pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Every 5 seconds, it faded in and out, casting an eerie glow that felt almost alive. The craft dwarfed the helicopter, easily 5 times its size, yet it emitted no sound. Not a hum, not a whir, just absolute silence. The helicopter, meanwhile, seemed like a restless insect beside the behemoth, circling it with frantic energy, as though escorting it through the sky. I stood rooted to the spot, staring in equal parts terror and awe. My mind raced with questions. What was it? Why was it here? The unease that had been creeping in earlier now fully took hold, wrapping around my chest like a vice. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever, or whoever, was in that craft was watching me, observing, studying. Despite my fear, I couldn't look away. Curiosity burned within me, battling the primal urge to run inside and lock every door and window. The craft moved slowly, deliberately, as though it had all the time in the world. Its movements were unnervingly precise, almost predatory. Finally, it disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving me standing in the driveway, breathless and trembling. The helicopter followed closely behind, its noise fading into the night until the oppressive silence returned. The whole encounter couldn't have lasted more than a few minutes. but it felt like an eternity. Shaking, I moved the truck and hurried inside. My hands fumbled with my phone as I frantically searched for any mention of what I'd just seen. To my shock and dread, I found countless accounts describing similar sightings, the same triangular craft, the same eerie lights, the same suffocating silence. Many of these stories mentioned military bases nearby, just like the two that were within an hour's drive of my home. Was it military? Was it extraterrestrial? My logical mind leaned toward the former, but deep down, something primal whispered otherwise. Whatever it was, it didn't belong in the skies above my quiet suburban neighborhood. And that feeling of being watched, it lingered long after I shut my curtains that night, leaving me haunted by the memory of those lights and the questions they left behind. Even now, I can't step outside under a clear night sky without glancing upward, half expecting to see that silent, pulsating red light staring back at me. It was a stormy night in 2011, the kind where the rain lashes against the windows and the wind howls through the empty streets. I had just finished my shift in networking, one of those late-night jobs that always ended around 2 a.m. The roads were slick as I drove home, the rain relentless, blurring the streetlights and painting the world in streaks of orange and gray. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the rain suddenly stopped as if someone had flipped a switch. The sky broke apart just enough to reveal a restless, low-hanging ceiling of clouds. I grabbed a cigarette and stepped outside to breathe in the damp electric air. A call from my buddy interrupted the stillness, and I answered, talking about work and the storm as I leaned against the side of my house. The streetlights cast an eerie orange glow, their reflections dancing on the underside of the clouds. The wind whipped through the trees, rustling leaves and sending a shiver through me, but the rain held off. I stood there, facing west, my voice trailing as I half listened to my friend. Something had caught my eye. To my right, emerging from the northern sky, I saw it, a black cube. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the massive object moved steadily, cutting through the clouds like a silent predator. It wasn't just big, it was enormous, at least 80 to 100 feet tall, with sharp edges and a surface that looked like rough, weathered stone. It didn't fly like an ordinary object. One of its corners led the way, as if it were twisting through the air, defying logic and gravity. What struck me most was the silence. No hum, no roar, not even the faintest whisper of sound. It glided south at an unnerving speed, 60 to 80 miles per hour, leaving a vaporous trail behind it, the air spinning and distorting in its wake before dissolving into nothingness. My heart pounded as I stood frozen, staring at the cube in horrified awe. On one side of the object, I noticed a border carved into the surface. Within it was a circular design, like a maze etched into the stone. It wasn't just a symbol. It felt purposeful, almost alive. My skin crawled as I locked eyes with the strange pattern, a deep sense of unease blooming in my chest. I fumbled for words, barely able to explain to my buddy what I was seeing. "There's something in the sky," I stammered. It's a giant black cube." He didn't laugh. Instead, he took me seriously enough to step outside, even in the rain, to see if he could catch a glimpse of what had me so shaken. As the cube continued south, heading toward downtown Dallas, it vanished into the horizon, swallowed by the storm. The wind picked up again, and within minutes the rain resumed its relentless downpour, as if the sky was trying to erase any trace of what had just happened. My buddy stood in the rain for over 15 minutes, but he saw nothing. That night changed me. I've told people about what I saw, but most just laugh or dismiss me as crazy. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a plane, a drone, or anything man-made. It was something else, something that didn't belong. Every detail of that black cube is burned into my memory. The rough stone surface, the silent flight, the ominous symbol. Since then, I've searched obsessively for answers. I've scoured forums, read accounts of UFO sightings, and hunted for anything that might explain what I saw. Every night I look to the sky, hoping, dreading that I'll see it again, because deep down I know it wasn't just a coincidence. It was real, and they're out there. It was a cold, quiet night in late November 2014, one of those eerie evenings when the world seemed too still. I was driving home from a long shift at work, the clock ticking somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. Living on a peninsula meant there was only one main road that wound through the area, cutting through patches of dense woods and quiet neighborhoods. The air was heavy with mist, clinging to the asphalt and dimming the glow of the streetlights. As I approached the side street leading to my home, I passed a familiar landmark, a small, weathered Baptist church that always stood out in the dark. Its parking lot was usually well lit, the floodlights casting sharp shadows on the building's white walls. But tonight, it was different. The entire lot was cloaked in darkness save for one solitary blinking red light. At first, I thought the light was coming from a distant phone tower, but something about it was off. The blinking didn't follow any discernible pattern. It pulsed erratically, like a heartbeat gone awry. A chill ran down my spine, and I instinctively slowed the car, my gaze fixed on the church. That's when I saw it. Hovering above the steeple, about 150 feet in the air, was a massive airship. The red light emanated from its center, illuminating the church roof with an ominous pulsing glow. My heart slammed against my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't a helicopter or a plane, it was something entirely different. The ship was long and cylindrical, almost like a floating metal leviathan. There were no wings, no propellers, no visible engines. Its surface was smooth, broken only by large vent-like protrusions that emitted an eerie white glow. The strangest part? It was completely silent. Not a hum, not a whir. Just an unsettling, oppressive silence that seemed to swallow the air around it. For a moment it hung there, unmoving, as if observing the church. Or maybe me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, to get as far away as possible. But I couldn't. I was transfixed, my eyes glued to the inexplicable sight. Then, it moved. At first, the airship drifted lazily to the side, like a balloon caught in a gentle breeze. I fumbled for my phone, a clunky old BlackBerry with a camera that was more of an insult than a feature. Desperate to capture proof, I pulled into the nearest parking space and reached for my DSLR in the back seat. But as soon as I shifted my attention, the ship reacted. In a flash, it shot westward, moving with impossible speed. 1 second it was there, and the next it was gone, vanished into the dark horizon, leaving nothing but an empty sky and an overwhelming sense of dread. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the steeple and the now fading red light that had haunted it. My mind raced, replaying every detail, trying to rationalize what I had just seen, but no matter how hard I tried, there was no logical explanation. That ship, whatever it was, didn't belong in this world. In the weeks that followed, the encounter began to seep into my dreams. One night, I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I had dreamt of strange, spindly creatures crawling through my bedroom window. Their bodies were twisted and insect-like, their eyes glowing faintly as they whispered in a language of shrieks and clicks. In the dream, I was paralyzed, unable to move as they reached for me with long skeletal fingers. When I jolted awake, I could still hear the faint echoes of their guttural whispers in my ears. It was just a nightmare, or at least that's what I told myself. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the ship, that whatever I had seen that night had left a mark on me, a tether to something far beyond my comprehension. Even now, I find myself looking to the sky every time I drive past that church, half expecting to see that ominous red light blinking in the darkness. Because whatever it was, I know it wasn't a dream, and I know it's still out there, watching, waiting.